Hi, everyone. This is Paul Cooper with the Take Note podcast. It's currently February 13th. Tomorrow's Valentine's Day. And today I'm bringing you the first part of episode 3, which is going to be covering different ways that you can use podcasts for your business, how to grow podcasts, how you can increase workflow, video editing, audio editing, and other things associated with the podcast world. Again, I'm at a live event here in LA. It's the Podcast Movement Evolutions. It's a 3-day event. So if you have any questions or if there are any speakers here that you know of that you'd like me to reach out to, please let me know. And the fastest way would be to reach me on social media or text me. And I'll do what I can to get answers for you. So make sure to do that while I'm still here. But anyways, let's go ahead and get started with the highlights of day one. So the first subject we're going to cover real quick is podcast growth in general. If you think podcasting is large now, I think we're all going to be amazed, and if not absolutely shocked, on how huge it's going to be in the next few years. We were looking at some stats today. The funny thing is that radio consumption is up. Everyone thinks the radio's dying, but it's not. Radio consumption's up, but music consumption is way down. So the difference is being made up by talk audio, and most of that comes in the form of podcasts. So there are a lot of podcast hosts out there that are now streaming podcasts across AM and FM radio bands, so people can listen to it in their car or other radio without actually having to download it. You also have different companies that are streaming it over the internet. iHeartRadio is probably one of the biggest ones out there, if not the biggest. And they're actually one of the bigger sponsors for this event. The other thing is that serious money is really being thrown around advertising and behind certain podcasts. So everyone says the barrier to entry is low, and it's still fairly low. I mean, it's not hard to create and publish this stuff. Most of it can be done for free if you have the equipment. However, the likelihood of you being discovered and being able to continue this in any type of meaningful way, especially if you're trying to create a business or have the podcast be the business that pays you, it's getting really hard because the market's being flooded with money, and that money's not always going to go to the best and brightest. So you're going to have a lot of gyms out there that are just never going to get discovered because they're never going to have the clout behind them for people to find them and build up any momentum. So don't think just because the technical barrier to entry is low that it's going to be a sure thing, because it absolutely isn't. Unfortunately, most podcasts maybe get to about a dozen episodes before they finally just peter out. So if you're doing a podcast to directly make money from the podcast, it's going to be a little of an uphill battle, so don't quit your day job. One of the biggest trends right now in podcasting is repurposing content. I mean, you're spending a lot of time creating a podcast, so why wouldn't you repurpose it? So people are taking their audio content and turning it into the written word, usually in the form of blogs and now best-selling books. And they usually do this by transcribing their shows, and then they can analyze their content and structure it into a book. And really, there are 7 steps to doing this. The first one is to have a goal, and that's more than just selling a bunch of books to make a bunch of money. What is the goal of your book? Is it to help people? What's it to help them about? You got to really get down and figure out what the goal of the book is. And then you need to analyze your content. All the podcasts, all the transcribing, everything else you've got, you need to analyze the content to see if there's a general theme. Because having just an anthology of a bunch of different ideas and topics probably isn't going to go over very well or sell well unless those are stories, and that's what you do for your podcast, and your whole podcast is just anthologies. The next thing is to have a really good hook for your book and create an outline around that hook. Much easier said than done, but if you can get people interested with that hook, then it's going to be much easier to create an outline and make sure that all of your content is set up to support that hook and keep people engaged and interested. After that, you just need to create a first draft. Hopefully at that point, with the outline, the hook, and the transcripts, it shouldn't be too hard to create a first draft. Granted, your first draft's probably going to be very rough and it's going to need some more work. And that's the 5th step. The 5th step would be to polish it and publish it. A lot of people are going to have a professional do this, and that's not necessarily a bad thing because most of us aren't going to be very good writers. The problem is a lot of people will do this. They'll pay someone to come in and fix it, and the book's still bad. It'll have great grammar and structure, but the book's bad because they didn't properly outline it. They didn't analyze the content to make sure that the book actually made sense. The sixth step is to promote the book, and you can do that in a ton of different ways. There's social media, there's getting on, mainstream media, getting people through email. There's all types of ways, but step 6 is to promote it. There's no point creating a book if no one knows about it. And then the final step is to leverage it or profit. That's where you're going to use your book to leverage your business and other things. That could be getting people to buy stuff. It could be just having people buy the book. It could be getting people to sign up with you for classes, invest with you, follow you. Whatever your business is, that's where you leverage it. And maybe your book isn't about business. So then at that point, you're just trying to leverage it so you can sell the book, and maybe it's just entertaining people. One of the largest and most important topics that's covered by a bunch of different speakers was growing your audience and expanding your exposure. Like we said earlier, there are a ton of great podcasts out there that you probably never heard of, and you probably will never be exposed to them. In the rare case that you do find one of these gems, you're probably going to be disappointed to find out that the show already ended, like we were talking about. Most of these shows end within the first dozen episodes. It's pretty sad, but there's a large podcast graveyard out there of good shows that just never made it. So the question becomes, how do you break through? You need to serve your audience the best product possible, but this doesn't necessarily mean having the best production equipment, amazing editing, or flashy graphics, or whatever else behind it that you can blow money on. But the only way you're really going to know what you need is if you ingest the content, you index it, you segment it, and you deliver the content appropriately. This can be an extremely time-consuming process. But luckily, there are a lot of podcasting companies out there and hosting platforms that help you do this. They can do it for pretty cheap, and some of them even do it for free, because a lot of these hosts, the way they make money is if you have ads on your podcast, then they get a percentage of the ad revenue, so they're not billing you directly. But the cool thing is these hosts will create and curate the metadata for you, so you'll know how your podcast is being discovered, what you need to do to have it be discovered through searches, and to deliver your content appropriately. Certain hosts will also make short intros for you so people can just go through the host and, here's a podcast on such and such. I like that topic. Let's see. It'll play a 30-second to 3-minute intro, and then people can be like, oh, no, that doesn't sound good, or hey, that sounds interesting, and then it's just a quick click to get to the podcast, and then now they found something. So it's making it much easier for people to be discovered. Another big topic that was discussed today is the power of storytelling. Unless you're doing a podcast that's very technical, that's going to attract people, and they know going in it could be a little dry and technical, like my podcast at time and other videos, it could be a little dry and technical. But people expect that because they're learning about real estate and finance and note investing, and it's not always the most sexy or exciting thing. However, even items like that can potentially be improved by storytelling. Give people the story behind it, what happened. Humans love stories. We've been telling them for, longer than the written word's been around, probably thousands of years. They entertain, they enlighten, they invoke strong emotions in us that we never forget. The hard part is really coming up with a good story on a regular basis. Anyone can come up with, one good story every now and then, but how do you do this on a regular basis? Well, here are 8 steps that Disney has used for decades to help them write compelling stories, stories that we all know and love and that we've never forgot. Step 1 is once upon a time. Start your story out with that. You need to have an intro, and it can literally just be once upon a time. The next step, every day. Every day this person did this. Every day this happened. That's step 2. And you can literally use these phrases to set up your story and have them in your podcast, book, whatever. And then step 3 is but one day. So it's once upon a time, every day, but one day this happened. And because of that is step 4. And it's literally because of that, this happens. And then step 5 is because of that. And then step 6 is because of that. So you get this 3 chain of because of that. So once upon a time, every day, but one day, because of that, because of that, because of that. Step 7, until finally. In step 8, the final part of your story is, and ever since then. So let's put this whole chain together. Once upon a time, every day, but one day, because of that, because of that, because of that, until finally, and ever since then. The 8 steps to help you write a story. And like I said, you can literally use those words. You don't have to, but if you look at it, it's a pretty good formula that you'll recognize for most children's stories. The next topic we're going to discuss briefly is how to be a good host when interviewing others. Interviewing is extremely popular on podcasts, especially if they're informative podcasts and they're not of the more entertainment and fictional nature. Being a good host and a good interviewer is hard. It's generally not natural because we all want to be engaged in a conversation. And the problem is a lot of us, since if it's your podcast or your TV show or whatever, if you're the interviewer, like, hey, this is my show, your ego gets in the way and you want to help people out and you start completing their sentences and things like that. It gets annoying. Your audience will be turned off. So here are a few steps you can use to help remind you to be a good host when interviewing others. Step 1 is to be relaxed and help your guests be relaxed. If you're not relaxed, your guest is probably going to pick up that, and then they're not going to be relaxed. They're not going to be as honest. It's not going to flow as well. It's not going to be natural. Everything's going to be really stiff. Step 2 is if you're not doing this interview live, then tell them about the editing process. Hey, look, we're recording this. If there's something that's really bad in there that you don't like, just let me know and we can remove it. If you start stuttering or sneezing, it's not a big deal. We'll just cut it out and do it again. And so you can let them know what the editing process is going to be like. And then the other part of that is, hey, it takes us generally this long to do post-production when we're editing it, so you can expect your episode to come out when. The third thing you can do is you can give your guest a list of the house rules ahead of time. This way they know what's good, what's not good, things like that. And step 4 kind of ties in with this, and that's let your guests know what your expectations are. No one wants to be blindsided and not know what's going to happen. That's why if you are going to be a hard interviewer, you should probably give them a little bit of heads up. Like, hey, look, I'm going to ask tough questions. I'm going to try to be respectful to that and give you your time, but I don't want you to be, upset or blindsided because they're coming. These aren't going to be softball questions. Or, hey, I'm going to ask you a question, and maybe I've got another guest on them. I'm going to ask them the same question. One of you will get to start talking first. You get to go for 3 minutes, and they get to go for 3 minutes, and then I'll ask either of you if you want to make any changes. That'd be more like if you were moderating a debate, but it's really nice to let them know what to expect ahead of time, and it will help them be relaxed, and you'll have a much better experience. Number 5 is probably the most commonly violated one, and that is don't answer questions for your guest. I'm bad at this, just about everyone's bad at it, and it's pretty annoying. You ask them a question, and you kind of already know their answer because you probably already know this person a little bit, and then maybe they're taking a little too long to say what you think they're going to say, so you start answering their questions for them, and it's not good. So the main thing is to ask the question, then shut up. And step 6 kind of ties in with this as well, is ask open-ended questions. You're not a lawyer cross-examining someone. You want the questions you ask to result in answers that are more than just yes or no. So ask that question and then let them respond. And then tip 7 is don't try to fill in uncomfortable spaces or silences. Let the question sit. Let the person think about it and give you an answer. You may interrupt them, you may feel awkward, and then now you're never going to get the answer because you've scooped in and saved them. So don't be afraid to let there be spaces. And again, if you don't want a bunch of big spaces on your podcast, if it's not live, you can always edit those out. So ask your question and then shut up. The last tip is only ask one question at a time. You ask the question, shut up, let them answer it, and let them fully answer it. Don't just, oh, you like this? Well, how about this as well? Let them fully answer the question and then move on to your next question. If you ask more than one question at a time, not only are you going to be rude, but you may never get the full answer to the question you ask, and it may not lead to other questions that you would have asked if you'd heard the whole answer. So those are some tips on how to be a good host when you're interviewing other people. And then the next segment we're going to talk about here is called Wrestling with Social Media. This was easily my favorite presentation of the day. I can barely describe the presentation. I was so entertained that I didn't even take any notes. I don't even remember the presenter's name. I'm going to have to go look around tomorrow to see if I can find it. Anyways, this presenter is a huge WWE fan and wrestling in general. He has a podcast about wrestling, and the main takeaway is that most messages that we put out on social media are boring and they don't result in the desired outcome. And a good example of this is that the presenter has his wrestling podcast. He tweeted out, make sure to subscribe and like us on YouTube. You can also find us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, blah, blah, blah. You can get this way or that way to get us. It resulted in virtually no engagement, even though it had good information. Like, hey, you're trying to give someone all the different ways that they can stay engaged and listen to your product. And it was flat, and he showed us the results. In contrast, he showed us a very simple tweet by a semi-professional / amateur wrestler that had huge engagement. And the post was just 3 words: Warhorse rules ass. That was literally his tweet. 3 words. His wrestling name is Warhorse, and all he tweeted out is that he rules ass. It led to just insane engagement. And if you Google it right now, it'll take you directly to the wrestler. It'll have pictures of him. It'll lead to videos of his past events. It'll talk about upcoming events he's going to be at. And it leads to a ton of merchandise he has of him wearing t-shirts and things like that that says Warhorse rules ass. So for better or worse, you don't have to be a poet to get good results on social media. The next big thing that was discussed today was why you need to build a community. The podcasts with the most loyal fan base have focused on building a strong community. They encourage people to interact with them. They create a two-way conversation with the audience. The audience wants to feel like they're a part of something, and they are. No one wants to just be talked at, and by engaging with the audience, you've got this two-way conversation. People are happy. You're going to have organic growth, and you're not having to struggle to come up with ideas that may or may not be good for episodes. Your audience tells you what they want. And the easiest way to do this is to have a crystal clear mission for your podcast. You can, and then now once you have that crystal clear mission, you can build your community around that mission. You need to consistently have a call to action for your community to keep them engaged. This could be as simple as reminding them to subscribe or having questions for your audience to answer, like who else is celebrating Taco Tuesday, or what's your favorite video, you watch this week, or things like that. What program do you use to do this type of video editing, or whatever. Keep people engaged. You can also encourage your community to email you or DM you their thoughts and questions. This way you can communicate with your most loyal and active listeners one-on-one. And the thing is if you spend the time on this, your community is eventually going to grow and champion your cause for you. You're going to grow organically after that. And it's a very fun and active way that you can grow, and it's going to be better for you and your community in the long run, because now there's something there. There's something worth joining and being active in. So to wrap this up, those are the highlights for day 1 at Podcast Movement Evolutions in LA. I'll have more for you tomorrow. And remember, when in doubt, make sure to add rules asked to any of your social media posts to boost engagement. I hope you enjoyed this. Again, reach out with any questions, and I hope you all have a good evening and a good rest of the week.